All right, so I want to finish off the third week here just by kind of going over some of the um, key points that we've spoken about. First of all, I just want to revisit the idea that inventory management and demand planning are interrelated, but they're two very different things. So be sure, if we can get rid of our driver, be sure that when you factor in what your demand plan is saying that you're going to be able to obtain that based on your service level objectives that you've established in your inventory management plan. Keeping in mind that there are the impact of having a low service level on low demand, low volume type items is may or may not be significant in the overall scope of things. So I wouldn't, just don't spend all your resource there. Spend your resource on managing the items that matter, and again, manage what matters. And understanding the business strategy, what the goals are for the particular period that you're in, is crucial to your ability to actually execute that. And you have to know that obviously well before that period begins because you can't react fast enough. Generally, can't react fast enough. Um, yeah, if you only have a short window in which to make um, corrections or within the plans. It's very hard to do in that kind of a situation. So we've kind of separated that. We've talked about the impact of service levels. We've gone over some inventory strategies, and again, the key takeaway there is that you don't have to use just one strategy. You can use a combination of strategies, and depending upon the nature of the product that you're managing and the amount of and the importance of that product in terms of your overall mix, in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. The other thing is that many of these tools are truly available for not a lot of investment uh, as software as a service or cloud-based, or they already exist within your enterprise systems to some extent. So again, you need to look at all those sources and make sure that the tool you're using is providing you the best answer, and challenge that if you by going outside and looking for somebody else to come in who might be able to do a better job for you um, in this area. If you are in an enterprise environment, though, just keep in mind you're best off using a current partner of your enterprise solution, because that way all the updates and can then be integrated into the answer. So I'm going to do about 10 minutes here, and that's about it. Okay, these are pretty much tried and tested things we need to do. Again, keep in mind we said there's there's nothing wrong with inventory. Inventory serves a purpose, and that's to meet demand. The issue in inventory is managing the variability, which is the unknown or the inconsistency of it, and trying to reduce the variability there. Now, some of that comes from lead times. It comes from consumer demand. It comes from accuracy of your inventory. All these issues come together and can impact you in terms of not know in terms of increasing the amount of inventory that you need to carry. So one of the key areas is this right here. Make sure you have visibility throughout the process, whether it's coming in, going out, it's in transit, it hasn't been delivered. You need to make sure that you have visibility throughout, and that is a major task. It's probably the biggest chance, the biggest opportunity we have within supply chain to do that. Though I would strongly suggest to you that based upon the recent cyber attacks, that you do not use digital video recorders or DVRs as the source of your visibility and lead times. So if you don't understand that, you might want to check that one out. But that's one of the main drivers of this outages that we had just recently regarding Netflix and a bunch of other websites, driven by Internet of Things, captured by digital video recorders, among other Internet of Things units. So make sure you've got that visibility. And to do that, you have to work very closely with your suppliers as well as with your customers, and making sure that you have, to the extent that you can get visibility within your customer base, that's fine. You see down here we talk about collaborative demand forecasting, and that's really where you're more likely going to get it. But work with your suppliers from the procurement side to make sure that you have visibility of what's going on. This may require you to do some work with your third-party logistics providers, and we'll talk about that later on as we get through it. This is a big one here too. Almost everybody has obsolete inventory, so get rid of it. Don't manage it anymore. Don't let it take up any space. Don't spend any more time on it. Get rid of it. And this can come from returns. It can come from just come from changing suppliers. It can come from changing consumers. You just need to get rid of this stuff, and there's lots of ways to do that. I mean, obviously you can liquidate it. That's the classic one, a couple of cents on the dollar. But a better way to do that, if you can, is to actually donate it. If you donate it, you get your cost back as a tax credit. I've done this extremely successfully in medical devices, where devices would come back to us, customers would send them back to us because of some situation. Either they were overstocked or there was some perceived damage, even though there wasn't any damage. And we would go through a review of these in a centralized return center, where we would determine whether the sterile barrier had been broken or not broken, and then donate the goods that we could to a charitable organization that would take them overseas. And that provided we were going to write it off anyway, so we wrote it off at cost, and we got a tax credit as well for the donation. This is a very powerful financial tool. And if you haven't, you might want to talk with your financial people about it. It's probably different for different people, but for sure, keep that in mind. Get rid of this stuff. Sell it off. Auction it off. Do whatever. There's many ways you can auction this stuff off online. You can do a B2B auction and sell all your old yellow pads. Anything is possible. Certainly one way to manage your inventory is to go to a pull-based system. So if you're in a multi-echelon manufacturing situation and manufacturing is made product, make sure that your planning is being based, per the demand plan, is being based on pull versus push. Push is where whatever is made has to go someplace into the echelon. It has to be inventoried or warehoused somewhere, whether it's in the factory, whether it's in a distribution network, wherever it is. So you're really congesting up those locations. So if you are on a push-based system, and this can happen in manufacturing, where you have manufacturing has financial incentives for absorption pricing. That is, the more units they make, the more they spread the overhead over those units, overhead including capital investments, so that in essence generates a lower cost per unit. And that's called a variance, and that variance can be booked as either profit or loss, depending upon which way it goes. I've been in manufacturing environments where that was one of the chief ways that the company booked additional revenue outside of its normal revenue flow. But the impact is that you push that inventory all the way out into the warehousing network. Collaborative demand forecasting. This is a good example of this. Is the example I used before with medical products, where where the manufacturer was receiving information from the distributors, which was getting this information from the hospitals, and that information was then flowing back to us as demand, and we were actually managing their inventory within the distributors' four walls, and that was an early collaborative thing. Currently now you can get point of sale data online. You can get this from third parties. You can get it from your retailers. So that's another way that you can look at this. The other one, if you're on a forward-looking type deal, like you have a contract, you're going to make your Boeing, you're going to make a fighter plane. You know you're going to make this fighter plane in this particular period. Then share back to your suppliers what you need, when, and where you need it. I'm sure that's happening today, but that's the idea of collaborative demand forecasting. Reduce the number of SKUs. This is also another really big item to do. I'll give you an example where um, one of the things that I've been able to do is to go into customer settings and conduct what's called value analysis. And value analysis is where you go in and you work with your counterparts on how can we take cost out, how can we standardize across. This is standardization over here. This is a biggie. We went into one of the major hospital systems, and the proof of pilot was actually to take a look at something as basic as examination table paper, in that paper that goes on the examination tables. And we found out in this hospital system that there were 13 different suppliers of examination paper. And so when you think, you have 13 different SKUs, you have exactly the same product. There's no difference between them to any great degree, but yet you're not leveraging. You've inflated the number of SKUs, and ties right directly into over here where you're not leveraging your purchasing power. And it's just one of those things that nobody ever looked at. Now, I would call it one of those C items, if you will. But as a proof of pilot, it showed the hospital administration that this is taking place. And so it became the genesis for a very big project that actually was driven around sutures rather than examination paper. But it became a very easy win, if you will, to make that happen. So we were able to reduce down from 13 SKUs down to a smaller number. Not everybody bought into one, and that's okay, but 13 is way too many to do that. So another good example of that is, well, we'll save it over here. It's better over here. Okay, then Pareto. Again, I think this is for most companies now. Pareto, the 80-20 rule, if you will, is pretty established, certainly well understood, and can be supported. If you haven't done it, do it, keeping in mind that it is not stagnant, it is dynamic, it changes as it changes. So make sure as you're doing periodic reviews or as you're doing your monthly forecast, you're updating what those categories are all the time, and don't be limited by A, B, and C. You can use 26 if you want, because it's just a flag. So again, if you can define 26 different variations of service levels and contribution along the lines of what we spoke about, good for you. That's pretty hard to manage if you do that. But I think the main thing is that identify it, start with something, and then continue to refine it, and realize where your resources need to be is in managing your A's and B's. So that's what we're talking about right here. Micromanaging the A's and B's. That's where the return is. And in some cases, in some companies' cases, the B's may not even be the return. So understand it. I think that's a big thing. Define it, drill down into it, understand it, do what's best for you. Dynamic replenishment is what you're doing in the demand plan, where basically you're looking for changes in trends, which we call the demand sensing, and use the best tools you can to manage that whole activity, because that then drives what happens down here in the inventory. Standardization, I want to go back to this one. One thing we did, one thing that was done, I didn't do this one, but I was around it. One of the things that was done at Emerson, which I thought was just absolutely amazing, was office supplies. I come back to that because I've seen this several times. Emerson took one of the divisions and said, in just one location of that division, and said, let's go pull all the office supplies out of all the various departments. And when they did that, what they found was similar to the examination paper that we talked about earlier. They found that there were multiple different types of ink pens being bought. They were not being used. There were different types of writing paper, yellow pads, white pads, blue pads, lined pads, whatever you want to say. People were, that was just kind of like funny money. It seemed like just kind of willy-nilly, really, without any real need to do it. And people were stocking up on these products, or they needed to place an office supply order every week, and they'd order 20 when you need 2, because that's how it was packaged. So what they did, and it was brilliant. They teamed up with one of the major office supply firms, put in a kiosk, and they said, we're only going to give you one yellow pad at a time. We're only going to give you one ink pen at a time. So you had to use your ID card, and you'd go there, and your ID card obviously is a license plate for who you charge. And you would go and you would request an ink pen, and you'd get one ink pen. And that way they were tracking. It wasn't they were trying to. It wasn't punitive. The idea was to track who's using this stuff, and can we reduce it down, and can we reduce down the number of SKUs and reduce down the amount of items that we have. And not only that, but let the vendor manage that through the kiosk. And that is exactly what happened. And it was a 6-figure cost reduction. And it was amazing what it did. I've also done this in factories too. Some of the factories we have, we would team up with Grainger or Fastenal, and things like gloves, safety glasses, box cutters, standard bench type tools that we would have available. But the whole idea was there were people who had a tendency to lose them or otherwise, and we would say, we'll buy the first one or the second one maybe, but after that it's on you and it comes out of your paycheck. So if we issue you safety glasses, those should stay at the bench, the workbench. They should not go home with you, and they should always be available, and they're your property, and we provide a place where they could put it. And once again, we were able to enforce the idea, again, not trying to be punitive, that if we issue you a workbench, whether it's a set of tools, which we did, or safety equipment, personal protective equipment, those were company assets. And so by putting them into a kiosk like that, we were able to reduce our cost and our exposure as a result of that. That's another thing you can look at. There's always going to be hidden inventories, and so hidden is not hidden in a negative way, but there's always going to be some amount of hidden inventory where your user says, I've got to make sure I've got that extra wrench or that extra battery powered drill or whatever it might be. They're not stealing from you, but it's there for some reason. One of the best ones was we found during one of these value analysis in an institution that the nurse station had put needles and syringes above. They had acoustic tile, and so they'd press the tile up and put a box of 100 up in the tile, and not. They just want to make sure they had them. And you know what? If I'm at a nurse's station, I want to make sure I have it too. So it's okay with me, but it doesn't have to be hidden, and that's the point. So those are things that are real life examples, and they're actually out there. So I think we kind of beat this to death. And then the micromanagement here of the A's and B's we talked about, really put your focus on managing what matters. That's the message. This week we have 2 cases out of your text. I'll put some notes in it to help you, just to kind of give you some guidance on what you're doing. Both of them are in the text, and look forward to seeing your posts over the next week. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.